Greetings, class. Welcome back to another session here of TESOL methods. This video is going to be talking a little bit about teaching language arts, specifically speaking and listening. We are using a textbook, and that is Nation's textbook teaching ESL learners listening and speaking. It is an excellent book. This chapter, he's going to be talking about dictation and what it is and why it's beneficial. It's interesting to me that while I was studying in the university related to second language teaching, that dictation was practically ignored. So I'm glad that Nation in his text is bringing this up and showing the advantages of it. We'll talk a little bit about what dictation is and how to prepare for it, and then the slew of varieties that are involved with dictation. What is a dictation? Now, I remember when I was in Spanish class, dictation was that your teacher said something and you had to write down what was being said, and he might repeat it several times. And that's your basic nuts and bolts. If you were fishing, there are some places where they have something called the catch and release system. If you're working with immigration, they also have this. You go out, you catch the fish, you reel it in, you catch it, and after you catch it, you let it go. And that's kind of what's happening here. The teacher says the dictation, and maybe they say it phrase by phrase or sentence by sentence. But they say a phrase, and then they allow the student to start writing things down. So they catch it in their mind, and then they write it down on the paper. So they're catching and releasing, catching and releasing. They hear it, and then they write it. They hear it, and then they write it. That's how that would work as far as the normal procedures for a dictation. Dictations are about 100 to 150 to 200 words long, and they're typically a complete idea or a complete story or a complete concept that's trying to be covered within that small packet of words. Doing this helps students focus on the language, focusing on the form. Because they're trying to write it down exactly as they hear it, including all of your proper articles and proper tense and that kind of thing. So it helps them focus on form. It also gauges their accuracy, because later on you can go and check this to find out how many mistakes they've made or whatnot. And so that's what a dictation is in its simplest form, right? Teacher's going to say something, students are going to hear it and write it down. Okay. Again, it's going to help them focus on form. It's also going to be able to gauge their accuracy, what they're listening, what they're hearing. How do we do this? How do we go about doing a dictation? Again, looking just at the definition, it seems kind of boring. There's a lot of things that you can do with this. It's a very simple thing, but there's a lot of ways to play with this. Let's go on here. I'm going to pick text. If I'm going to choose a text, what am I going to do? Make sure it's something that's practical. If you've got students who are in a history class, pick historical content. If they're in a geography class, pick geography content. Make it interesting. Find ways to make this activity fun or of interest to the students. You know, for example, Nation mentions actually make the completed dictation a mystery, something they have to figure out. So not only do they have to do the listening and the writing down, but when they're done, they got to figure out what this thing is. They got to figure out what the answer to the mystery is. Great idea. Now it's fun. Now you're giving them this information, and they got to try to figure out what it is. Some pre-dictation activities. Excuse me. You're going to want to look for specific words that you want them to be able to work with, or phrases or grammatical structures that you want them to learn and practice with. So you can try to include those in the dictation. After you're done with that, there are a variety of ways that you can prepare to do the dictation. You can do the recite once. This is the normal setup, actually. You read the whole thing to them once, and they don't do anything. So you read the whole thing, and they're just listening. And then you read it again. And on the second iteration, they're taking notes. They're trying to write down everything that's going on. So you recite it once, and then you do a recite and write. Okay? Another possibility is that you allow them to read it once. They're allowed to read it one time, and then you do the recite and write. You say it, and then they try to write it down. Recite, and then write. You can also do some pre-activities by telling the students, make sure that you focus on time. Make sure you focus on, putting in the proper person endings, third person singular, for example, or to focus on articles type of thing. You could also tell the students to be prepared to ask questions. Or to try to look for questions, or if they have any questions, okay? So you read, you allow them to ask questions, and then you do the recite and write. You could give them questions, okay? Another thing that you could do. You hand questions to them, and so you've given them some pre-hints of things to be looking for, knowing what's going on, and then you go through the normal recite once, recite and write, okay? Again, you're trying to help them figure out what those, some of the contents are before they even get started. Some pre-dictation activities. All right, that's your basic thing. Let's look at some variations. And I've got 7 here. There are more. You can go out and find a whole bunch of stuff on dictations. One is called runner, and that's where you've got 2 or 3 people in a group, and they're working on a dictation. And one person is allowed to leave the group, and they go over and read the text. And they try to get it memorized in their head, and then they come back and they tell the group, and the group has to write it down. And that person's going back and forth trying to get all the pieces together so that everything can be written down properly. It's a race, okay, some type of competition. You can do the one chance type of thing where you only say it once. This is obviously for students that they're making fewer and fewer mistakes. They're able to do this better. You can make it more difficult. You give them the one chance option where you only recite it one time. You don't go over it again. You can do the long phrase activity. Originally, you start out with smaller chunks so that they can try to process that and write things down. But as they get better, you make the phrases longer. Or maybe you make it a full sentence, and you say the whole sentence, and they've got to write down the whole sentence before you pause. Other activities. You could do a guided study, which is basically you've got certain words filled in, but you got mostly blanks. And they've got so those key words that you have listed in the paper, on the paper that they're writing out, those are going to help them. They're going to help them gauge where things are because they can hear them. You can do a peer dictation. You got 2 partners. One is reading, the other is writing. Okay, so now they're both working. One's pronunciation, one is doing the actual writing down of the dictation. You can do a close. And a close is similar to a guided study, except that the majority of the words are there. And you might do a close one chance type of thing as well. I don't know. You can do the do until perfect activity. And that's where they do it once, and then it's corrected. Okay, and then you just circle their mistakes type of thing, or you note that they have these many mistakes, and then you do it again. And then you keep doing it until it's perfect, until there are no mistakes. Type of activity. And again, it can be a competition or a race, or you get points, or some way to keep it motivating. Obviously, you can also have the message that's there be meaningful to them some other place. Be it homework that they have to complete, and you're giving them their homework via dictation. You could do a recorded dictation where they have to listen and write down. Listen and write down. That way they can go backward and forward as many times as they want. And again, you could have the completed dictation stuff that they need to do, stuff that they need to figure out, but they have to write it down, right? Focus on the accuracy and the form. So these are just some different variations. Here are some other related techniques that you can do. You can do a delayed repetition. Some teachers, they'll do a dictation. They'll read that first sentence, and then they'll wait a second, and then they'll do it again. They'll read it again. And there may be ways where you have a delayed repetition. You read that phrase or that part of the dictation once, and you wait longer. So these kids, as they're trying to figure out, they've got a longer wait time, and they're trying to keep that stuff in their memory, in their midterm memory longer, so that they can use it. Okay, as they're waiting for that new information to come. You can do a read lookup pre-activity, where you've got student A, 2 people in a group, and one student reads vocabulary words to the other one. And the other one looks it up in a dictionary to find out what it means, so that when you do the read recite, or you do the recite and then write, students will already know that those words are going to be important in the dictation. You can do delayed copying, where you don't give they have to wait before they start copying, and again, they have to keep that in their memory longer before they can copy it down. Another interesting thing that Nation talks about is something that he called monitoring the dictations. If you continue doing dictations throughout a quarter or a semester, or however your classes are set up, you can begin to monitor how well they're doing the dictations. You put this stuff into a spreadsheet and you begin to realize that they're making fewer mistakes as you go along, or the gaps that you're using are larger and they're doing better. You can then modify how you're doing the dictations to make it more difficult to continue helping your students to push into greater accuracy and greater ability to hear and write down what's being said. Very good for note-taking in future, but monitoring the dictation is a great idea. The last two bits that he mentions in here is the Dictogloss and the Dictocomp. The Dictogloss is a 5-step process. One is where you're going to obviously prepare the materials and prepare your students for listening, pre-activities, and then you're going to have them listen for meaning. They listen one time, trying to understand what's going on, okay? And then they listen and take notes. And again, they're listening to this dictation, and it might, it might be longer, it might even be something, anyway, it could be longer than the 200 words, but again, they're going to be listening and they're going to be taking notes. They're going to try to get every word they can down. After they're done with these 3 steps, the preparation, right, helping them understand what the vocabulary are, for example, listening once for meaning, listening and taking notes, then they get together in a group and they try to reconstruct what was said. Okay? They're going to try to write down exactly what was spoken to them. And then lastly, they'll do a comparison. They'll see the original, they'll see their work, and they'll be able to identify where they made mistakes, if any. And that's what a dictogloss is. A very interesting activity. There's a lot of other things that are involved than just the dictation. There's the group work, where they have to do negotiation of meaning, where they have to try to help each other and look at the form to find out, well, no, I can't put an S here because it's the first person. It's not a third person type of thing. So maybe it's something else. One group can obviously help another, iron sharpening iron. Associated with this dictogloss is the dictocomp. It's basically the same thing, except there's no group work. The individual, you prepare them individually, they listen for meaning individually, they listen and take notes, and then they compare. Personally, I think the dictogloss is going to be much more better. Do you believe I just said that? They're going to be better because they're going to be able to work in groups, and in so doing, be able to help each other understand and learn faster. Last point here is some related issues to the dictogloss. One is retelling. Okay, you go back to the dictogloss where they do a compare, but they could also then, let's just imagine you've got 5 groups of 4 and they're working in these groups, but each group has a different recorded message that they heard. And then they do all this, and then they have to turn around and they have to tell somebody else the story. They do a retell. And Nation has also talked about the 4-3-2, where they retell in 4 minutes, and then they tell somebody else, they retell in 3 minutes, and then they retell in 2 minutes. And in so doing, they get greater fluency in their speaking. Another one where you have the disappearing text, where they have some text, and then you start taking text out, and they have to try to fill that in, because, of course, they've tried to memorize it. And then there's the recite and repeat. So someone says it, and then someone has to say it back. So maybe it's in groups where you have somebody say a sentence or part of a sentence, and then the student has to say it back to you. And if it's not spoken back to you exactly, then of course you do it again. And then you can have the recite, delay, and then the repeat. So you as a teacher, you recite part of the dictation, and you make them wait 5-10 seconds before they repeat it back to you. And of course they've got to try to keep that in their head, keeping in their memory longer, exercising their memory faculties so that they can have a better, they can have a stronger memory system as far as keeping that information in their short-term memory. And that's all for this chapter. I would highly recommend that you use Dictation. It is an excellent focus on form. You can use it as a springboard into content if you want, but it's an excellent short encapsulated activities that you can use to help them focus on form and at the same time be working with meaningful material. If you do have any questions or problems related to this unit here, this little lesson, please give me a call on email or via Skype. Bye-bye now.